Welcome one and all to a review that I have been wanting to do for the last 7 years since I played this game, The Last of Us, brought to us by Naughty Dog Studios. To say that it's one of the greatest games that I've ever played, it's been heard before by many people. I'm not a video game person necessarily, I prefer movies over video games, but video games can be fun for me. And if certain people are looking for a certain type of game like Mario Kart, Star Fox 64, Donkey Kong Country, or Diddy Kong Racing as I used to play when I was a kid, or the various Star Wars games that have been made, The Last of Us, you know what? I'm just gonna say it. This is by far the greatest game I have ever played in my life, period. And since its sequel, The Last of Us Part 2, is right on the horizon for a release date, what better opportunity for me to talk about, in my opinion, my all-time favorite video game. Now, in case some of you guys haven't played this game, there's gonna be spoilers. I'll try not to talk about everything too much, but there's gonna be a lot of details in here, more than likely, so you've been warned. Anything you could say about The Last of Us has already been said in the past 7 years, but hopefully I could do this game justice and in some ways maybe provide an original experience for you. Also rocking a green flannel shirt just like Joel does in the game, and got a bit of a beard going on, which is probably what it would look like if I were in the apocalypse. This is my pandemic beard, just in case you guys didn't know. And normally I'm not really into zombie apocalyptic stuff. The Last of Us though, for me, that's the exception. I couldn't care less what the genre is exactly. If it's done in a way where I can feel connected emotionally to the characters, then the developers of the game, they've succeeded. I'll give you guys a little bit of my history with this game. It was about a few months after I came home from basic training in the military, and I went over to my local GameStop to buy a copy of Batman Arkham Origins, and I saw the poster for The Last of Us. I'd seen a couple of pictures of it online and in various places out in public, but when I saw the poster of it on this big box, which I guess was some PS3 bundle special edition of some kind, because originally it came out on PS3. I have the copy somewhere. I still haven't fully unpacked all my stuff since I moved into my new place about 1.5 years ago, but I do have the PS4 copy, and it looks a little bit better on PS4, but for PS3, we'll get to it later, but it looks good on PS3 regardless. But anyway, I saw the poster at my local GameStop, and I thought, I wonder what that is. And I asked the guys behind the counter, hey, what's with that game, The Last of Us? And they all looked at me like, you haven't played it yet? Dude, you have to try it. It's amazing. I was a little taken aback by that, but I was also intrigued. And after seeing certain reviews of it from Jeremy Johns, Chris Stuckman, on a whim I decided, you know what? I'm gonna go buy the game. I'm gonna give it a try. That opening mission, when Joel's daughter Sarah is killed, I almost cried. I'm not kidding. Like, this game truly affects you emotionally. You have to play it, or at least watch for yourself the gameplay footage online. I've talked to some people who aren't really video games, and I say to them, hey look, if you could at least watch the gameplay footage online without the commentary, you'll know what I'm talking about, because this game is really special. I'm getting excited talking about it, because knowing that the sequel's on the horizon, and getting to share with you guys my personal thoughts on this game, I never expected to do this review. Hey, maybe I could try like a gameplay commentary one day, who knows? Just gotta figure out how to do that exactly. I'm sure there's tutorials out there somewhere, but we'll get to that another time. Let's just start with the graphics right off the bat. The graphics in this game are incredibly well done. PS3, PS4, I don't think I've ever seen anything look this good. The lighting, the shading, the motion capture work on the actors, the facial expressions, the way their mouths and eyes moved. I literally bought that those were actual people talking, like real people interacting with each other, even though I know it was a video game. And the voice acting is spectacular. Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, Nolan North, and Annie Wershing, who plays Tess. Hopefully I said that name correctly. And the direction from Neil Druckmann, who's the main creative force behind this game. In my opinion, it all paid off. And the way the game looks, based on certain locations that you're in, like the Boston area, Pittsburgh, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, the atmosphere in this game makes you feel like you're actually there in those places. All the trees and leaves and grass that are growing all over these buildings, and the streets are like collapsing like it's a sinkhole, and all these puddles are forming. I don't think it's a falsehood to say that, you know what? That could actually happen. If the apocalypse were to happen like that, it could happen. And seeing those two skyscrapers in Boston leaning against each other like that, it really goes to show you just like if humanity were to stop caring about whatever was going on with all the man-made structures, in the words of Poison Ivy from Arkham Knight,
nature always wins.
And if you watch the behind-the-scenes featurette of The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann actually talks about that.
This book called The World Without Us describes in detail how much fighting on a day-to-day basis we have to do to keep nature back. And once you stop doing that, how quickly nature can reclaim that. As they talk about New York, and how every day they pump water out of the subway system. That system breaks down within 2 days, a whole city is flooded. And once water gets introduced, then structures collapse pretty quickly.
And there's also the level where you go into the woods in this nearby town outside of Boston. The way the sun shines through the trees, it makes you go, that's really the sun. That's real. As we'll get into the gameplay in a minute, that attention to detail is just so good. Now, as far as the gameplay is concerned, it is just about perfect. There are a couple of glitches in here, but every game has glitches. There's no dancing around it. It's also very limited. It's not an open world that you get to explore like in the Spider-Man PS4 game or Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto, although you do get to explore certain areas that you're in. You can walk around, you can run, or you can jog depending on what the situation is, and you also have an arsenal of weapons at your disposal, but it doesn't come to you all at once. You have to pick certain pieces up as you go throughout the game, such as pistols, rifles, shotguns, or the flamethrower, which is one of the best weapons you'll ever pick up, and also the Molotov cocktail and the nail bomb. You can also use a bottle or a brick in order to throw at a certain enemy or throw it at a certain area to distract your enemies and make them go a certain direction. They mostly work on the infected because the humans, they're able to think a little bit strategically and try to outsmart you as you go along. The infected, all they care about is getting their next meal. They're just like animals, so they don't really care. But as far as the Molotov cocktail and the nail bomb, in order to create those things, you have to pick up certain pieces of scrap as you go along, such as bottles of alcohol, pieces of tape, scissor blades, and you could also improvise your weapons, such as a pipe, a piece of wood, or a baseball bat. You could do what's called meleeing a weapon. You could put the scissor blades on a baseball bat, so when an enemy comes up to you, you could strike them right in the neck and kill them instantaneously. And you could also go to a workbench where you could upgrade your weaponry, like your pistols, your rifles, your flamethrowers. You could change the range speed, the reloading speed, the clip capacity, the fire rate, and various other things. But in order to do that, you gotta pick up the right amount of supplies because it has a certain limitation on crafting your weapons. Like for instance, the clip capacity might take 10 pieces, and then you use up 10 of your pieces and you might have 20 pieces left. So you gotta be careful and mindful of what pieces you pick up along the way. And you could carry 2 weapons at a time if you wanted, but again, you have to upgrade your capabilities in order to do that. If you want to go from a pistol to a revolver, you have to hold the X button. Joel will go into his backpack, and then you can select whether you want the revolver or the Colt 45. Similar thing with the shotgun or the hunting rifle. And the AI in this game is fantastic. The human enemies in particular are very unpredictable. In fact, even playing some of this game last night, I got to the part where they're inside the Massachusetts State House after Tess is killed. I'm in the last area before I can get outside into the subway, and there's 2 soldiers left. They're all walking in circles, and I'm studying their movements as best as I can. And just when I think I have a window in order to get outside, they immediately turn around and head back in my direction, and I have to hide behind cover again. It's really frustrating. It makes you go, oh no, oh God, come on. Not kidding, I actually snuck outside. I almost got caught, and I hid behind cover, and next thing you know, out they come into the street looking for me. It's like, dude, you guys did not see me running out. How did you know I was out here? And when you fight certain enemies like the infected or the human beings, 2 different types of strategies. The human enemies are a bit annoying because they can kind of predict your movements and where you're going to go and whatnot. The infected, they're predictable, but they're a lot more scary. Especially when you go into certain dark areas like in basements where there's a bunch of spores hanging around. I always pull out my iPhone and put on upbeat music during those sequences in order to keep myself sane. And sometimes my mom would come walking by my door and she'd see me and go, "What are you doing?" "Mom, I'm going through this dark room where all these clickers are at. It's my process, leave me alone!" And she would go, "Okay." Speaking of the infected, the story of the game opens in the year 2013, and then it jumps about 20 years into the future in the year 2033, where most of mankind is wiped out during a pandemic of a cordyceps fungus that either kills people or turns them into these zombie-like people that are called the infected. Joel, after losing his daughter Sarah to a soldier who thought that they were sick, is now a hardened smuggler in the quarantine zone of Boston working with this woman named Tess, and they're given this mission to protect this young girl Ellie, who's of a very key importance, and they have to deliver her to this group of fireflies in the Capitol building in Boston outside of the quarantine zone. Despite all the cool graphics and gameplay that I mentioned, really at the heart of this game is the father-daughter relationship that forms between Joel and Ellie over the course of the game. When the outbreak of the cordyceps starts happening, Joel, his daughter Sarah, and his brother Tommy try to escape, and Joel runs into this soldier as he's carrying Sarah away. He stops them thinking that they're sick, he starts shooting at them, knocking them down the hill, and Tommy comes to the rescue, killing the soldier, only to find out that Sarah's been fatally wounded. I kinda wish I was recording my reaction to this at the time when I first played it, but here's a little reenactment for you.
Oh no. Sarah. Move your hands, babe. I know, baby, I know. God. Listen to me, I know this hurts you. You're gonna be okay, baby. Stay with me.
The first time in years that I actually felt attached to a set of characters in a video game. The first time for me that happened was the Brothers in Arms video game series. Road to Hill 30, Earned in Blood, and Hell's Highway, where the main character throughout these three games is Sergeant Matt Baker, and how he's trying to cope with the fact that he's now a squad leader in the middle of World War II. And funnily enough, Troy Baker also voices Sergeant Baker in this game. The opening credits where the artwork of the cordyceps starts growing, and you hear the various voices playing as like certain news anchors are talking about the outbreak spreading across the world. It gives you a pretty good idea of what exactly happened to humanity as this outbreak started happening over 20 years. Talking about how the World Health Organization failed to come up with a vaccine, the United States government becoming a police state, which leads to the formation of the Fireflies trying to restore the country back to what it was. In the 20 years since then, with Sarah dying and the apocalypse happening, Joel, understandably, has become a very hardened person and very emotionally guarded. He does not want to have any kind of connection in a familial sense, at least. And after they hunt down this guy named Robert, who basically stabbed them in the back, the leader of the Fireflies, Marlene, asks Joel and Tess a favor. Get this young girl named Ellie out of the quarantine zone to the state capitol building where the Fireflies will take her across the country. As they're sneaking out and they run into two soldiers where they almost get killed, they discover that Ellie is positive for the cordyceps. Now, they establish in the game that when someone's bitten, it takes 1 or 2 days for them to turn into one of the infected. Ellie's bite was 3 weeks prior. Joel at first is not exactly believing the idea, but Tess seems to think that it's true. And once Tess gets bitten by infected, she realizes that Ellie's condition is legit.
There's enough here that you have to feel some sort of obligation to me, so you get her to Tommy's.
So begrudgingly, Joel decides to take Ellie across the United States in order to find Tommy. And over the course of this game, I love seeing the father-daughter-like relationship blossom between these two, because at first Joel is not really keen on getting to know Ellie at all. But little by little, piece by piece, as the game plays out, in certain moments you could see the bond starting to grow a little bit, like how his tone changes with her as it goes on, and how he's able to trust her in certain situations, like when he finally allows her to use a gun.
Well, I sort of shot a rifle before, but it was at rats.
Rats.
With BBs.
And they have some really interesting conversations as you go through certain areas where Ellie sees certain places like a music store, picture of a Victoria's Secret model, or where she reads this girl's old diary.
Is this really all they had to worry about? Boys, movies, deciding which shirt goes with which skirt. It's bizarre.
It's probably one of the most fascinating aspects about this game, because unlike Joel, Ellie actually grew up in this world. So her commentary on the little things that you and I take for granted in our everyday lives, it makes you realize that, you know what? If I had to choose between living in this life right now or that world in the apocalypse, I would choose the former every single day of the week, because our struggles are completely minuscule by comparison. And one of my favorite parts is where they finally reach the university finding the Fireflies, and Joel's teaching Ellie how football is played out.
And if you clear the 10 yards, then you're back at first down?
First down, that's right.
Man, that's confusing.
You just gotta play it a couple times. It all makes sense.
I've had conversations like that with certain friends of mine who don't really understand football, so I try to explain it to them as best as I can. And my dad did the same thing for me when I was a teenager, and I was trying to understand how it all worked out. And I just love that little detail, and it makes you realize that, you know what? I would really hate it if I had to live in the apocalypse knowing that there wasn't going to be another football game. I'm glad it's still around, though. And the characters of Joel and Ellie are probably some of my all-time favorite fictional characters. Joel, played by Troy Baker, as he's described by one of the creators of the game in the behind-the-scenes featurette, he's warm, yet kind of dangerous. And Troy Baker said in an interview where he read a description of the character saying that he has very few moral lines left to cross. And they do a good job of conveying that to you in the story. Joel's a pretty hardened human being in the last 20 years since he lost his daughter, but yet there's still a slight sliver of hope left in him when he meets Ellie. Little by little, piece by piece, she chips away through his wall, and she's able to help him realize, oh, I still have it in me to be human. And Ellie, played by Ashley Johnson, do I even have to say anything else? Ellie is freaking awesome. She is great. And she doesn't take any crap from anybody. She talks back at people. She swears up a storm sometimes. And she also does these little things throughout the game as you're walking through areas like those little things that a kid would do. And it makes it so realistic. And Ashley Johnson brings so much heart and personality to this character that Joel is a great character, and I feel Troy Baker as Joel. But But Ellie steals the show here. She's the absolute heart and soul of this game. In fact, there's a reason why she's mostly towards the front of the cover of this game, because really, without even realizing it at first, she manages to steal your heart. And the scene where she says this to David, where she's locked up in the cage.
Tell him that Ellie is the little girl that broke your finger.
And I love seeing the growth of Ellie throughout this game. She's not naive, she just doesn't know any better. And when she runs into certain people and certain types of infected, learning through Joel what exactly happened in the years since the apocalypse happened, that by the end of the game, she comes to this higher level of understanding of how exactly the world works in this universe. And she has to accept their harsh reality that people will do anything in order to get their way in this world. More so less in Civilization, but the apocalypse, that's where you see people's true colors really come out. Particularly when she meets David, who leads this group of cannibals. And when you first meet David, you don't really know what to think of him. When I played it for the first time, I thought, maybe he's okay, maybe not. But then he helps you fight off certain types of infected in this warehouse, and you go, oh, okay, so all right, maybe this guy can help you out. And we'll get to the reveal in a second, but prior to this, Ellie and Joel were trying to find the Fireflies in this hospital. It turns out they weren't there, and they moved to Salt Lake City. They get ambushed by a group of bandits, and during a struggle, Joel falls over and lands on this big pipe that impales him right through his stomach. So Ellie helps him get out of there while fighting off the remaining bandits, and then it cuts to the next season. She's looking for supplies and certain types of food, and that's where she runs into David. After the struggle with the infected, David says,
A few weeks back, I sent a group of men out to a nearby town to look for food. Only a few came back. They said that the others had been slaughtered by a crazy man. And get this, he's a crazy man traveling with a little girl.
Oh, shit!
yeah, it turns out he was the leader of that group of people that ambushed them at the college. Then there's also the group of hunters that you run into in Pittsburgh, where anybody who comes into the city they call tourists, they immediately shoot them on sight and steal any kind of clothes or food or any other types of supplies that they could find on them. They're a group of people that rebelled against the military rule in Pittsburgh because, as I said earlier, the United States government became very tyrannical in trying to contain the outbreak. So eventually the people started to push back, which therefore leads to the hunters in Pittsburgh and other various factions like the Fireflies or the WLF, as we'll see later on in The Last of Us Part 2, where that group formed in Seattle trying to fight back against the military rule in that city. Not to bring up the coronavirus again, but it kind of reminds me of what exactly is going on right now because of all these protests that are happening around the world and across the country where people are starting to push back against these lockdowns. Since these politicians keep pushing the end of the shutdown dates back further and further and further, people start to, in their own way, resist what's going on. Very different set of circumstances, but again, I'm just saying, I can't help but notice the parallels and the similarities in both of these situations. And the game does a good job of putting the wariness of this world on your shoulders and how all these various people dealt within their own ways of what the apocalypse did to them. There's very little in this world that's worth fighting for. Optimism has been completely stamped out from dealing with hunters, bandits, cannibals, the Fireflies, the military, and the infected. Except for maybe Tommy's Town, which gives the people there some kind of solace, there's not really that much to get excited about in this world. And also along the way, you run into these two guys, these two brothers, Henry and Sam, who manage to be some really good partners in crime and helping you getting out of the city of Pittsburgh, but they ditch you right when you're being chased by the hunters, and they later save you after you fall into the river off of the bridge. Joel is very understandably pissed off, but Henry brings up a good point when he says,
"If it was the other way around, would you have come back for us? I saved you."
It makes you go, yeah, I probably would. People in this world might do something that's a bit of a jerk move. They're just trying to survive just like you and I probably would. And also, the infected. These things make my skin crawl. I absolutely hate these things. In a good way, not in a bad way. This is a really unique take on zombies. They're not exactly zombies. I mean, they are in a sense, but they call them the infected. There's these different types of stages that they have for the infected. The runners, the stalkers, clickers, and bloaters. Those are the 4 stages of infected where, unless they get killed, the more time goes on, the more the fungus starts growing over the body, and it turns them into these deranged maniacs. The runners will attack you on sight. They don't have the greatest vision, since if you look at concept art, they're eyes are kind of lopsided because the fungus grows inside the head and throws off the eyesight. And then as you go into the stalker stage, the fungus starts growing outside the skin. Then you get to the clicker phase where the fungus grows and splits the face in two and covers their eyes. So how do they get around? Echolocation, just like bats, making a clicking sound. And they're very hypersensitive to sound, so when you're around one of these things, you gotta be very, very, very careful on how much sound you make, because even the slightest quiet, loud noise that they hear, you better run. And then it gets to the bloater stage, where the fungus completely takes over the body, and it's about a 10 or 20 year time span where it gets to this point. These things are really hard to kill. These infected, they're not exactly subtle. As scary and terrifying as these things are, they're at least predictable. Joel says to Ellie at one point when they're sneaking through the college trying to figure out what all the noise is, Ellie says, "It could be just clickers, right?" No, clickers don't hide. And if they so much as get their teeth into you, or if the bloater gets its hands on you, it's game over. Now, as far as the stages of infection themselves, the game doesn't really go into the science of it all. This cordyceps fungus actually does exist in real life, but it only infects ants. Neil Druckmann and some of the creative team behind this game saw a BBC documentary where it talks about the cordyceps. They were very fascinated by it, that it made them think, well, what if it jumped to humans? Could it happen in real life? Possibly. From what I heard, scientists have said, no, that's not really likely. But the way this game presents it, it makes you go, that could actually happen. And I'm really curious to see how the new stages of infected will factor into these 4 different types of infected, because we see the Shambler in the recent gameplay demos. That looks really freaky. And Neil Druckmann has said there's different types of new infected as well. Dude, you're killing me, man! Ugh! Now eventually Joel and Ellie find their way to Salt Lake City, and they find the Fireflies at the local hospital. And Marlene tells them that the only way to make a vaccine is to kill her, because it grows all over the brain. And Joel is not really pleased. So he basically lashes out, kills any Fireflies that come into his way. He manages to save Ellie, and they escape from the hospital. Now, you do understand where the Fireflies are coming from, but even me, I was like, oh no. Oh no. No, you don't. You are not killing Ellie. But the Marlene's determination with, this could save humanity, she is the key to a cure. But that's just her own determination, because throughout this game, as you hear from a recording from a dead Firefly, all they really tell you is that it's possible to make a cure for this cordyceps, but there's really no guarantee or certainty that this thing's gonna work. In order to do that, you would probably have to do years and years of studying and research and clinical trials, trial and error, in order to understand this thing and how it functions from one phase to the next. My take on it, there really was no guarantee that this cure was going to work, so I think Joel made the right call. And even if there was a cure for this thing, it wouldn't automatically save humanity. The infected would be gone, but society is pretty much shattered, and if they were going to try to rebuild society back to the way it was, it would take decades, maybe even a few centuries if they were lucky. The world wouldn't be all sunshine and rainbows. It would still be pretty much a dreary situation. And you could see how much Joel cared about Ellie. He felt like he was able to have another child again, so he was not willing to lose another daughter on the whims of another human being. And as he's running through the hallways and the Fireflies are chasing him,
We're okay. We're okay.
oh my god, and it's a nice parallel of what happened earlier as he's carrying Sarah away from danger. Joel does the same thing with Ellie in this situation, but it's the reverse effect. And the musical score by Gustavo Santaolalla, I really tried with that name. I really did. This guy, I believe, was an Academy Award winner or nominee for Best Musical Score. He did musical scores for movies like Brokeback Mountain. The score in this game is just so... it's gorgeous to listen to. I even have some of the tracks on my phone. I mean, to talk about the musical score, I'll be here for ages, so go give it a listen if you haven't already. But one of my favorites is the Goodnight piece, where Joel puts Sarah in her bed.
Good night, baby girl.
Oh, I love it. And the fact that Joel cares this much about Ellie, it plays into the overall theme that this game has. Love. How far are you willing to go, and what are you willing to sacrifice because of how much you love someone or how much you care about somebody? And Joel is willing to live in a world infested with disease maniacs, hunters, cannibals, and bandits, as long as he can have this child with him. And it's such a beautiful concept with the way you see it play out. And you see a similar thing happen when the two brothers, Henry and Sam, end up dying. Sam becomes infected, Henry has to kill him, and then when he realizes that his brother's gone...
Nobody's fault, Henry. It's all your fault! Henry! Henry, no!
Oh my god.
really have someone that you care about that much? Are you really willing to live in that kind of world without them? And we see just how much they've grown close to each other, like in the restaurant where Ellie finally gets the drop on David and ends up slashing him with a machete. And then Joel comes in.
Oh, baby girl. It's okay. It's okay.
Joel.
It's okay.
Whew. Oh, man. So after Joel manages to get Ellie out of the area from the fireflies, she wakes up in the car and he tells her that they found the fireflies and they had a whole bunch of people that were immune. They tried all these various tests and nothing happened. He lies to her, telling her that the cure wasn't even going to work. So when they finally arrive at Tommy's village in Wyoming, Ellie stops Joel, telling him about the survivor's guilt that she has when losing her best friend Riley in Boston, then Tess, then Sam, who all three of them were infected, and that she's still waiting for her turn. And then she asks Joel,
"Swear to me that everything that you've said about the fireflies is true."
I swear.
Okay.
I couldn't help but wonder, like, there has to be another game. My interpretation is that I think she knows that on some level, Joel is not being honest with her, but then she decides to trust him because how much she looks up to him as a father. Maybe he'll tell her the truth in the sequel. We'll see. And one last thing, the game also has a really good sense of humor too. The various moments where Ellie reads out of this pun book.
A backwards poet writes in verse.
Do you even get that?
Of course not. I used to be addicted to soap, but I'm clean now.
And the funniest scene in the whole game is when she finds the magazine that she stole from Bill's place.
How the hell would he even walk around with that thing?
Get rid of
Look,
that.
hold your horses. I want to see what all the fuss is about. Oh, why are these all stuck together?
Hey, Bobby Fischer, don't touch anything on that board. Bobby, what? Just let it go. Now, in case you're wondering what my thoughts are on the DLC Left Behind, I really like that. I like the fact that it's a prequel of sorts, but it also fills in gaps that may not have needed to be filled, where you see how Ellie was able to care for Joel when he got impaled by that pipe. But nevertheless, it turns out to be a really good addition to the game. And I like the fact that we see how Ellie got bitten in the first place inside the mall in Boston. And we see the friendship form between her and Riley, and even a little bit of a romantic connection between the two, especially when she ends up kissing Riley. Now, the first time I played it, I thought, is there something going on between these two? And then when she kisses her, it's like, oh, knew it, I knew it. And I don't really feel like it's necessary, but does it bother me personally? Absolutely not. And if people are bothered by that, well, that's on them. And truthfully, I feel sorry for those people because it doesn't matter if you're gay. If you're a good person in here and in here, then it shouldn't really matter. Now, in the main storyline at least, Ellie's sexuality was never even hinted. So I think it's perfectly fine for them to go back and show her kissing Riley. So you go, oh, okay, she's a lesbian. Well, okay. That was how I reacted. In conclusion, The Last of Us, in my opinion, is a masterpiece of video games. The greatest game that I've ever played in my life, and I will never get tired of playing it. To this day, 7 years later, every once in a while, it still creeps into my consciousness, and I don't regret playing it for 1 second. Naughty Dog, and if you guys are somehow watching this, well done. Those are my thoughts on The Last of Us, and I am beyond excited for The Last of Us Part 2. Okay. I'm fine. Oh god, I can't wait for that game. I really, really hope that it's a good game, and I'm really excited to get my hands on it. I already pre-ordered my copy. I cannot wait for it to show up. It'll be the first new release of entertainment where it can hopefully give me some kind of a relief after all this crap with COVID-19 started happening. I'm excited. I am excited. Those are my thoughts on The Last of Us. What are your thoughts on the game? Do you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts. I'll see you guys all very soon, and remember, endure and survive.